And welcome back to America Can We Talk. Love had my Right View Roundtable. Joining me tonight, Lori Medina and Lori Guerra. And as I mentioned before our break, we have just an amazing human being joining us this segment. And we have her on the phone line. I wish she could be here, but she's in California. And her name is Elisabeth Sabaditsch Wolff. And I will tell you a very quick thing. So Frank Gaffney, who's been on my show many times, founder of Center for Security Policy, called me last week. I forget why he called. But anyway, he ended up saying, have you had this Elisabeth Sabaditsch Wolff on your show? He goes, I'm pulling over right now. I want to give you her phone number. So I now know a lot more about her than I did before. And good evening, Elisabeth.
Good evening from California, from sunny California.
Wow, I'm glad to hear it's sunny. I guess it's kind of sunny here, but probably not like California. Okay. Well, I want to jump right into your story. I've now read a lot of information about your story, and I think the easiest thing for our listeners might be, I'll quick say that you are an Austrian, country of Austria citizen in America, having given various speeches over the recent years talking about the loss of freedom of speech in Austria and Western Europe. I'd love to have you just tell our listeners, if you would, in a shortened version, your story. What happened to you in Austria that led to actual criminal charges?
The story is easy for me to tell, but probably very hard for Americans to grasp, since you still have a First Amendment. As I was getting into talking and teaching more and more people about the effects of Islam in Austria, the leftists came across my name and decided to infiltrate the seminars that I held. And they infiltrated them and made a surreptitious recording of the seminars, and then basically ran off to the prosecutor, who then decided to press charges. I then saw a year later, approximately, so in 2010, there was a trial, and the judge did not find me guilty on the original charge, which was incitement to hate. But she added a second charge during the proceedings when she saw she couldn't get me on the first one. So the second charge was denigration of religious teachings, and that is basically a blasphemy charge. So I was found guilty on that. I was fined. I appealed first to the appellate court, to the Supreme Court, lost, of course, both instances, and the case is now pending, or has been pending for the last 6 years, or 7 years almost, at the so-called European Court of Human Rights. Now, the European Court of Human Rights is usually very friendly towards freedom of speech, but we have been expecting a verdict or a brief for my lawyer and I have been expecting that probably since July or August of last year, and it has not been handed down. So it makes you wonder why. I have my own theories. I think you would have your own theories too. So that's where I stand.
I certainly would. We're speaking, if you've just happened to tune in tonight, with Elisabeth Sabaditsch Wolff, an Austrian citizen. But I want to back up and just say, in your story, you began in Austria speaking and giving seminars about the impact of the growing Islamic immigration into Austria and other Western European countries, essentially, as I understand, in your seminars, teaching about the basic tenets of Islamic law, of the Quran, the Hadith. So you were speaking about what Islam itself writes and says about itself. Is that right?
Factual information about Islam. There was nothing that wasn't factual. I mean, you can go to the books, the books on Islam. You can go to the Quran, the Hadith, the life story of Muhammad, the biography, and you would find what I said. However, the judge did not like what I had to say about the child marriage of Muhammad, the Prophet of Islam, and his child bride Aisha. So I asked during the seminar, I asked a rhetorical question, and I said, what do you call this behavior if not Islam? So what essentially I was doing, I was looking for another word to describe a behavior that isn't condoned in our Western society. And she judged that it is factual for me to say that Mohammed had sex with a 6-year-old and consummated the marriage when she was 9. But calling this pedophilia is an excess of opinion.
Wow. Okay. It's very interesting because in America, we feel so safe, really, for the most part. You may be derided and criticized by people who don't agree with you politically, but pretty much people feel safe, even on a show like this, right? I say pretty much anything that I think politically. But in Western Europe, which I think we all assume is kind of like America, that it's a Western values, Western civilization country. But you're talking about in Austria. I wrote down, I actually read a lot of your information about you online. The name of this charge you had been convicted on is denigration of religious beliefs of a legally recognized religion. So Austria is saying essentially, you can't criticize what another religion believes, but to get to the point where your case or your story was brought to the attention of prosecutors, it was some left-wing magazine that showed up to monitor you, which is another creepy aspect of this. This is kind of the leftist mentality playing, not policeman exactly, but playing spy, agitating, trying to make sure that if they can make a case against someone on the conservative side, they're agitating that the government shut somebody else down.
Correct. That's precisely it. However, this law actually encompasses all legally recognized religions in Austria. So that would include Christianity and Buddhism and Judaism, what have you. But the problem is this law is never applied to any other criticism other than that vis-a-vis Islam.
Yeah, and actually that is what I want to jump to because, these segments on this show, they sadly go so fast. They just makes me crazy. I want to turn then. So you have your case pending before the European Union's High Court, or whatever the name of the court is.
No, it has nothing to do with the European Union. This is an actual European court. There's countries in there that are not member states of the European Union.
Oh, okay. So they agreed to take your case, and if they decide in your favor, that Austria respects that, the country of Austria respects that decision.
They do have the opportunity or the chance, or they could appeal. But I was told if Austria loses, it's unlikely they will appeal, and that it will have incredible repercussions.
Yeah. This whole instance you're describing is occurring against the backdrop of the refugee crisis, people moving around the world, and some of them legitimate refugees, many not, but moving into Western Europe and many trying to come to America and Australia and other countries. And you made a point in one of the speeches I read that you talked about Europe is kind of going over a multicultural cliff, and that you're watching the advocacy or the outcome of this borderless society feel. Can you comment on that?
Well, my question to people advocating a borderless society is, do you lock your door at night? And usually people will say to me, well, yes, of course. I mean, and why, I ask them, well, why would you do that? Well, to keep out people who I don't want in my house. And that is the argument that I have. I don't want people in my country that have no legal right to be there. You're very welcome if you want to come into Austria and visit Vienna. Come in legally, present your passport, present your money that you're planning to spend. Do it according to the law. I mean, I when I came to the U.S. about 10 days ago, I was asked, what are you doing here? Where's your passport? When are you leaving again? Where's your ticket? Things like that. Normal, ordinary questions. And all of a sudden, just because these refugees, or so-called refugees, they can throw away their phones. They lose their passports. I'm sorry, but they keep their phones all the way from Syria, from war-torn Syria. I mean, something is wrong here, and we have to wake up and look at the facts. And that is why I support President Trump's moratorium on citizens from these countries. In many instances in Europe, in Austria specifically, we have no idea where these people are from. They will just come in and say, well, I'm from Syria, asylum.
Yep. We're speaking, if you just tuned in, with Elisabeth Sabaditsch Wolff, and she's an Austrian citizen. She's here in America. She's speaking up about many different issues. And when we come back from the break, I want to turn and talk about what this whole challenge of free speech in Western Europe, does she see, would this ever happen in America? How does she see that in terms of America? So come right back after our break. And welcome back to America Can We Talk? We have someone online tonight that I honestly, Elisabeth, it's very hard to do justice to your, not just to your story, but to the importance of what the battle you're fighting and the importance to America of it. And so in the quickest summary way, we're speaking with Elisabeth Sabaditsch Wolff, who is Austrian, who was putting on seminars in 2008 forward in Austria, trying to warn people about the aggressive Islamic ideology that's behind a lot of the refugee crisis, that it is not just people who happen to be coming from war-torn countries and are helpless, but they're actually refugees who are largely young military-age males, that there is a concept in Islam called hijra, which is the use of immigration to essentially push your way in and then commit jihad when you get enough numbers. And so she tried to warn people about that, and that actually cost her. She was criminally prosecuted in Austria for essentially speaking the truth about what Islam teaches. In fact, the statute. So what you're trying to do is what so many activists, including Frank Gaffney and others in America, are trying to do, which is warn people that the Islamic immigration throughout Western Europe and coming to America is not just simply peaceful people coming to look to assimilate. It is potentially a very dangerous and aggressive situation with the spread of radical, intolerant Islam. Is that a good summary?
That is an excellent summary. I couldn't have said it better myself. May I add just an explanation to what you talked about regarding hijra? If we look back at all the refugee waves that took place after World War II, you saw refugees flocking from Europe to Europe mostly. So from a Western country to a Western country. So there was no real problem other than perhaps the odd language or two for these people to actually integrate or assimilate. There was no religious problem. Now, you have all these people from mostly Muslim countries. Actually, I would argue they come in from Muslim countries. And it makes you wonder, they are, I would say, 99.9% devout Muslims. Now, why on earth would they want to come to Europe? It is a completely alien religious system in Europe, a completely alien government system. It's an alien culture. It's an alien climate. Now, why on earth would they come? Wouldn't they rather go to rich countries like Saudi Arabia or the other Gulf countries, or anywhere else? Indonesia, it's an Islamic country. It's apparently peaceful. That's what we're told. Now, that ties in with the hijra. They are supposed to emigrate to Europe, to North America, in order to populate there, in order to build mosques, in order to build Islamic schools, in order to not to assimilate. They are supposed to fight to retain their own cultural, religious, and political ties. And that, of course, means trouble. And that's the trouble we are seeing in Europe, and that's the trouble we are starting to see here in the United States. And it's going to get worse, I guarantee you that. And you're probably going to ask me, well, what do I suggest the Americans do? And I think the answer to this question is a very simple one. Protect the Constitution. The only way you can protect the Constitution is if you know what the Constitution is all about. Simple, isn't it?
I'm sorry. We know what the Constitution all is about. What was that last point? And
it's a very simple point. You have to protect the Constitution. And without knowing what the Constitution is all about, you can't protect it. So you have to learn about it. You have to study it like I did when I was in 8th grade. And then you go out and you protect the Constitution. because that's the only piece of document it's the best and the easiest constitution worldwide, and you have to protect it.
It's absolutely true. And, I think it's very interesting because you have your battle going on in Austria, and you have many people in the world are watching what's happening in Western Europe, and you end up with a picture of, why is Western Europe, why aren't people standing up more? Why aren't they stopping this? And in fact, the people are trying to, it's the leaders more who are not. We had a call, we have a system where you can leave a message, a call and question ahead of time. We had one caller who had a question for you. I don't know if it's ready over there, Greg. You ready to roll? Okay, we have one question for a caller.
Why not continue, or rather, there seems to be a rise in EU populism and nationalism. Do you think the EU is waking up, and will they be able to turn back the tide? Thank you.
That is not only a loaded question, but also a difficult question to answer. First of all, the EU will not react. The EU is bloated. The EU is not interested in any of this. Actually, the EU is all about getting population replacement. Going back to Count Coudenhove-Kalergi in the 1920s, who he actually started the idea of a European Union, and he predicted there would be replacement of the white European with a white Negroid population. Okay, so that's already happening. That's what they want. That's what the European Union wants. Second, there is no such thing as populism. Populism is a buzzword.
Amen.
The only thing I can tell you about is if you are populist, you're actually the good guy because you're listening to the population. So I don't know why everybody's so afraid of populism. And I can tell you the left, the political left in Austria, who are in government, are currently the most populist political party in Austria. It's amazing what the money they're handing out to people. And the second, the other part of the question was the nationalistic move. Yes, I'm nationalist in that I am patriotic, and for me it's always Austria first and then everything else. So if that's a bad thing, then maybe Americans should ask themselves if they're nationalistic, because when I travel to the United States, all I see is U.S. flags all the way, patriotism, Pledge of Allegiance, and is that a bad thing? So tell me, is it bad in America, but is it good in America but bad in Austria? I don't really get the question.
Yeah, you know what? I the points you're hitting, and we talked about in the show so many times, it just the lazy or loose use of words that carry all sorts of connotations that are not accurate, and the notion that in America, standing up for to me, what it means to be patriotic is standing up for the ideas America was founded on: the Declaration of Independence, the Constitution, rule of law, separation of powers, all the things we need to keep America stable. That's patriotic, and it is unique in America. I mean, the whole world would be helped by having more of America's founding ideas as part of theirs, but to support those and think they matter, it's just, you can't overstate it. Elisabeth, we're gonna I have to roll here, but I do want to, if you can just tell our listeners, I love hearing about your situation and that you're speaking up and speaking about preserving culture against the Islamic aggression. What can people do to support you?
You know what? They could go online to access the webpage EncounterTruth.com. This will be a very unique project. Let me remind listeners, it's not live. The website. It will be live hopefully by the end of the month, and people will be able to hear a 1-hour segment a week with me, sort of reporting live from Austria, and I will have great guests on my show. Hopefully also I'll have Alan West. If he's listening, hi, Alan. Hope you're doing okay. I'd love to have you, and so we can discuss more information. And I will also report on different conferences that I attend where I speak out against Islam and Sharia law, and especially Islamophobia, because that's a big point that we need to raise, an important point. So EncounterTruth.com.
EncounterTruth.com, Elisabeth Sabaditsch Wolff. If you just Google Elisabeth with an S and then Wolff, Wolff, you'll get her stories to come up. And I'm grateful for your bravery and your outspokenness. And honestly, I just think that there are many canaries in the coal mine trying to yell out and say, hey, before America is overrun with an aggressive form of Islam, we need to be watching what's happening in Europe and be protecting our precious country. So, Elisabeth, thank you so much for calling in.
Well, thank you for having me, and goodbye from Los Angeles.
Goodbye to you and to our listeners. I'll tell you, we have one more segment after our break. I'm going to share just a couple things that after the break, that she wrote in a posting she has, so don't go away. Come right back.